The stars above Earth gleamed like distant promises, their cold light piercing the endless expanse of space. On the surface, the planet appeared tranquil, oblivious to the horrors that had once threatened its existence. But beneath the Earth, deep in the forgotten catacombs of ancient sanctuaries, something stirred. The keepers were waking. For centuries, they had slumbered in their underground sanctum, hidden from humanity's sight, their existence reduced to myth and legend. Orin, leader of the keepers, was the first to awaken. The pull of an enigmatic signal, resonating through the very fabric of space and time, had breached the keepers' dormant minds. It was a calling, faint at first, like the whisper of a long-lost dream, but growing stronger with each passing moment. Orin rose from his stasis chamber, his immense form rippling with untapped power, his senses flooded with the memories of a past long buried. With a deep, resonating breath, Orin placed his feet on the cold stone floor. His fingers flexed, the once familiar weight of his power stirring in his veins. The keepers were no longer just legends, they were real, and they had returned. Beside him, the other keepers began to stir, one by one, each rising from their slumber. Maris, the warrior who had once faced armies alone, cracked her knuckles with an audible snap. Solon, the keeper of ancient knowledge, stood silent, his piercing gaze fixed on the glowing console at the center of their sanctuary. His mind raced as he analyzed the signal, a network of interconnected frequencies that had somehow breached their defenses after eons of silence. The signal, Solon muttered, his voice low and filled with unease. It's coming from beyond the known borders of the galaxy. Something has disturbed the balance. Orin's eyes narrowed. It's a call, Solon. A call to action. We have been awakened for a reason. Their leader turned toward the vast stone doors that led out into the world above. They had long sealed themselves away, knowing that humanity was not ready for their return. The keepers had once been Earth's silent protectors, their powers unmatched, yet they had chosen to remain hidden until now. Orin felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. For centuries, humanity had thrived without their protection. It was unclear whether that prosperity had been a blessing or a curse. Would they be welcomed as heroes or feared as gods? And more importantly, was humanity even capable of recognizing their true purpose? Prepare yourselves, Orin commanded. We journey to the surface. Whatever has awakened us, we will face it together. As the keepers ascended toward the surface, their memories of Earth's past began to return. Flashes of their ancient duties, the battles they had fought, and the promises they had made to protect the planet. But nothing prepared them for what they would find. The world they emerged into was alien, a far cry from the Earth they had once sworn to defend. Skyscrapers stretched toward the heavens, their lights dazzling but hollow. Humanity had advanced far beyond the simple civilizations of their time, but at what cost? The landscape of Earth had shifted, leaving behind a world that felt unfamiliar, even dangerous. The keepers stood at the precipice of this new world, and for the first time in their long existence, they realized the true magnitude of their return. A signal had brought them back, but what awaited them now could either be salvation or destruction. The stakes were higher than they ever imagined. As Orin and his fellow keepers looked out over the world, one thing was certain: the time for silence was over. They would need to rediscover their place in this new age, even if it meant facing an uncertain future. The keepers stood in stunned silence, taking in the sight of Earth as it had evolved beyond their wildest imaginings. Towering cities sprawled across the landscape, their gleaming spires reflecting the sun like unblinking eyes. Hovercraft zipped through the sky, their engines humming in perfect harmony with the digital symphony of a world that had left the ancient past behind. Earth was not the quiet, struggling planet the keepers had last known. It was a thriving, fast-paced, and dangerously complex society. Orin, ever the leader, took a step forward, his mind already assessing the situation. We must make contact with those in power, he muttered to his closest allies. But we must be careful. They may not remember us, or worse, they may not want to. Maris, the warrior, glanced at Orin, her brow furrowing in thought. We were guardians once, the protectors of this world. Yet they seem to have forgotten us entirely. Why were we never told this would happen? Solon, the keeper of knowledge, shook his head, his eyes distant. It was never our place to decide when to reveal ourselves. Our duty was to remain hidden until the signal called us back. But this, he gestured at the sprawling city before them, this is not the world we left. They have evolved beyond our control, and they might not trust us to guide them. Orin knew that Solon was right. The Keepers had existed for a purpose, to stand at the edge of history, hidden until the very moment humanity needed them again. But now, that moment was uncertain. The Keepers were relics of a past that most of humanity had left behind. As they moved through the city streets, the Keepers attracted curious glances. People stared, some in awe, others in suspicion, as their otherworldly appearance stood in stark contrast to the smooth, mechanized world around them. Their clothes, simple yet regal, bore the marks of their ancient origins. Their eyes glowed faintly with the remnants of their power, and their presence emanated a sense of authority that felt out of place in this new age. It didn't take long for the first confrontation to arise. A group of soldiers, clad in futuristic armor, approached, their weapons raised in suspicion. "Who are you?" the leader demanded, his voice sharp and commanding. "What do you want here?" Orin stepped forward, his aura calm but unmistakably powerful. "We are the Keepers," he announced, his voice carrying through the air. "We are here to protect this world once again." The soldiers stiffened, exchanging wary glances. "Keepers?" The leader repeated, the word unfamiliar on his tongue. "Your legends, myths, are you some kind of threat?" "We are no threat," Orin replied, his voice unwavering. "We are the ones who guarded your ancestors from dangers you have long forgotten. But now, something far darker has come. A threat to this world and beyond. We need your help, if you will offer it." The soldiers hesitated, their fingers twitching near the triggers of their weapons. The world had changed. Humans had grown accustomed to relying on their advanced technologies and weaponry, not ancient beings with powers that felt too old to understand. And even more troubling, they had no memory of the Keeper's existence. To them, they were simply strange figures in an already chaotic world. Just as tensions began to escalate, a voice interrupted the standoff. "Let them through." The voice was calm, composed, but with an edge of authority. A woman stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. She was tall, with short-cropped hair and eyes sharp as steel. Her uniform marked her as a high-ranking officer, someone with power. "I am Commander Lyra Grayson," she said, her gaze locking with Orin's. "And I think it's time we heard what you have to say." Orin, sensing an opportunity, inclined his head. "Then we will speak, Commander." As the group moved deeper into the city's heart, Orin could feel the weight of history pressing down on them. These humans, this generation, were strangers to him, and yet their fate was now tied to his own. The Keepers were back, but the road ahead would not be easy. They would have to remind Earth who they were and earn their trust once more. Behind them, a ripple of energy passed through the air, unnoticed by the humans but felt by the Keepers. Far in the distance, in the shadows of space, a dark force was stirring, one that would not be ignored. The command center of Earth's military was housed in a sleek, high-tech facility nestled deep beneath the planet's surface. Commander Lyra Grayson led the Keepers through the labyrinthine corridors, where holographic displays flashed with data and armed guards stood at attention. The Keepers felt the weight of their ancient presence, but their minds were elsewhere. Each of them could sense it, the same ominous pull that had awakened them in the first place. Something was coming, something much darker than the simple distrust of humanity. Orin's thoughts were heavy as he walked alongside Lyra. The signal we followed wasn't a random anomaly, he said, breaking the silence between them. It is a beacon, calling us to a coming storm. Lyra glanced at him, her expression skeptical but intrigued. A storm? What kind of storm? Orin met her gaze, his eyes glowing with an intensity that made the air feel thicker. The Voidborn. Lyra stopped dead in her tracks, her soldiers halting behind her. The Voidborn, she repeated, her voice laced with disbelief. I thought those were just ancient legends. They are not. Maris spoke up from behind Orin, her voice sharp and unwavering. The Voidborn are an ancient race, creatures of living darkness, born from the very heart of the universe's chaos. They devoured civilizations long before humanity first stepped onto this world. They are a force of pure destruction. Solon, who had been silently observing, nodded. When we first became Earth's guardians, the Voidborn were already a threat, but we sealed them away, kept them at bay. However, now they are breaking free, and we must stop them before they reach Earth again. A chill ran through Lyra at the mention of an enemy so ancient, so powerful. She knew the legends, every soldier did, but hearing them from beings who had once fought them made the tales suddenly feel real. Her heart hammered in her chest, a gnawing sense of urgency rising within her. Why haven't we heard about this before? Lyra asked, her voice strained. How are they even here? What is happening? Orin turned, his expression grim. The Voidborn are not bound by time as you understand it. They are a force of entropy, of nothingness that consumes all in its path. Their reach is vast, and their hunger is insatiable. They've already begun their invasion, starting with the galactic core. Entire systems have already fallen, consumed by the Voidborn's darkness. They are moving outward, and Earth is next. Lyra clenched her fists, the weight of his words sinking in. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy, rested on the fragile shoulders of the Keepers, and by extension, her people. What can we do? Lyra asked, determination setting in. We must reassemble the relics, Solon replied. There is an artifact, a weapon forged in the early days of the universe's birth, capable of countering the Voidborn. We must find it before they do. The relic will help us awaken the full extent of our powers. Lyra swallowed, her mind racing with questions. A weapon that could stop the Voidborn. It seemed almost too incredible to be true. Yet she could see the fire in the Keeper's eyes. Their certainty that they were not speaking of myths, but of something tangible, something humanity had been ignorant of for millennia. Orin stepped forward, his presence commanding. We cannot waste time. The Voidborn's forces are already moving toward the edge of the solar system. We must leave immediately. The urgency in his voice snapped Lyra into action. Where do we begin? The artifact lies hidden beneath the earth, Orin explained. There are catacombs, old ruins from before your history, forgotten by even your most advanced technologies. We know where it lies, but we will need to cross treacherous terrain to reach it. The path is fraught with dangers. We'll get you there, Lyra said, rallying her forces, but we'll need to be quick. We have no idea what we're facing, and it could be too late before we even begin. With that, the team, both human and keeper, moved out. As they made their way to the surface, the sky outside was already growing darker, as though the very atmosphere was thickening with the pressure of something terrible descending. Far beyond horizon, beyond the stars themselves, the Voidborn's dark armies were drawing near, and Earth's forgotten guardians were the last hope for survival. Lyra's mind raced with the overwhelming reality of the situation. She had thought her world was secure, that humanity had the strength to face any challenge, but now she knew better. The universe was vast, and some threats were older and far more dangerous than anything humanity had ever imagined. The Keepers had returned, but could they be enough to stop the coming darkness? The journey to the underground sanctuaries was long and perilous. Lyra's convoy of soldiers, equipped with the latest in Earth's military technology, navigated through the harsh, forgotten terrain beneath the surface. The keepers, with their otherworldly calm and ancient knowledge, led the way, moving through the craggy tunnels with practiced ease. Maris, the warrior, walked at the front, her sharp eyes scanning the shadows for any hint of danger. Solon followed close behind, his mind focused on the delicate calculations of the relic's location. As they descended further into the Earth's depths, the air grew thicker, colder, and the weight of centuries of isolation pressed down on them. Lyra felt the eerie silence all around them, broken only by the rhythmic echo of their footsteps. She couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The deeper they went, the more distant the world above seemed. It was as if they were leaving behind the very essence of humanity. "Are you sure about this?" Lyra asked, her voice a whisper against the ominous quiet. She turned to Orin, who was walking beside her, his expression as unreadable as ever. "This place is a memory," Orin said, his voice low but steady. "The relic we seek lies beneath the weight of time. But it is not only the past we face down here, it is the present, too." Lyra frowned. "The present?" Solon, overhearing, spoke up, his voice almost a murmur. "The Voidborn do not care for the passage of time. They are older than these tombs, older than anything in this universe. They know the power of forgotten things, and they know the power of memory. This place is a tomb for a reason." As they moved deeper into the labyrinth, the walls began to change. What had once been smooth, stone-carved corridors began to show signs of age. Cracks in the walls, strange glyphs and symbols etched into the surfaces. The markings told of a time when the keepers were not merely guardians of Earth, but the architects of its very safety. It was in these forgotten tombs that they had sealed away the greatest threats the universe had ever known. The Voidborn were just one such force, and this relic was their final safeguard. They came to a massive chamber, the air thick with ancient dust. The walls were adorned with murals depicting the keepers in battle, their forms glowing with the immense power they had once wielded. The light from their glowing eyes was a stark contrast to the shadows that surrounded them. But what caught Lyra's attention most was the massive stone altar in the center of the room. Beneath it lay a door, one that seemed to pulse with a dark, heavy energy. "This is it," Orin said, his voice reverberating in the chamber. "The tomb of the Voidborn relic." Lyra stepped forward, her boots crunching on the stone floor. "What exactly are we looking for?" "The relic is an ancient weapon," Solon explained. "A crystallized form of energy forged in the heart of a dying star. It holds the power to annihilate the Voidborn, but it requires the strength of the keepers to wield it. And even then, it may not be enough. But it is our only hope." Maris stepped forward, her keen instincts alert to the shifting atmosphere. "This place feels wrong, like something is already here." Orin's hand rose in warning, his senses extending outward. A ripple of energy stirred in the air, faint but unmistakable. "We are not alone." The ground trembled beneath them, a low rumbling that grew louder with each passing second. Lyra's soldiers tensed, their hands instinctively reaching for weapons, but the keepers remained calm. "They are coming," Orin said, his voice heavy with urgency. "The Voidborn are already here." Suddenly, the shadows in the room seemed to stretch, twisting and warping as if they had a life of their own. A dark, oppressive force filled the chamber, crawling up the walls and across the floor like a living thing. The air grew cold, and an overwhelming sense of dread washed over Lyra. Then, from the darkest corner of the chamber, they emerged. The Voidborn. They were not what Lyra had expected. The stories had told of monstrous, shadowy figures, beasts with writhing tendrils and void-like forms. But these creatures were something else entirely. They were shapes in the dark, formless and alien, their bodies made of a swirling mass of nothingness that seemed to devour the very light around them. Eyes, or what passed for eyes, glowed with a sickly red hue, and their forms twisted as if they were constantly shifting, changing, and reforming. "We need to move now," Lyra shouted, her voice breaking through the rising tension. The soldiers moved to engage, their weapons lighting up with streams of energy, but the Voidborn seemed to absorb the blasts, their forms dissolving and reappearing elsewhere. Orin's voice rang out over the chaos. The relic, we need to activate it before they overwhelm us. With no time to waste, Lyra and the keepers rushed toward the altar, their every movement calculated and precise. The Voidborn, relentless and terrifying, were already closing in. The darkness pressed in on them, and the room seemed to shrink. But in that moment, as the ancient tomb trembled with the weight of an impending battle, Lyra realized one terrifying truth: the keepers might not be enough. The air in the chamber grew thick with malice, every breath a struggle against the crushing weight of the Voidborn's presence. The swirling, amorphous creatures shifted, their form never fully stabilizing, and their eyes, if they could even be called eyes, burned with a malevolent hunger. The soldiers, despite their advanced weapons, could do little but fire in desperation, each shot swallowed by the Voidborn's shifting bodies, absorbed into the abyss they were made of. Lyra's mind raced, her military training kicking into overdrive. Form a perimeter. She shouted to her soldiers, her voice cutting through the chaos. Protect the keepers while they activate the relic. The soldiers moved quickly, forming a defensive ring around the keepers and the altar, their weapons sending bursts of light into the darkness. Yet the Voidborn were like shadows, slipping through the cracks of reality, impossible to pin down. For every blast that connected, two more of the creatures appeared in its place, their movements so fluid, so alien, that it seemed as if they were made of pure darkness. Orin, standing resolutely at the altar, raised his hands, his eyes glowing with a faint blue light as he began to chant in an ancient language. His voice, though soft, carried the weight of centuries, each word a call to something greater. The air around him began to crackle, the energy building, as the relic beneath the altar began to pulse with a low, resonating hum. "It's working," Solon exclaimed, his voice barely audible above the roar of the battle. He was kneeling beside the altar, his hands hovering just above the stone as he chanted in unison with Orin. "The power is awakening, but it's unstable. This relic hasn't been used in eons." The Voidborn recoiled for a moment, sensing the disturbance, but then they surged forward, driven by an insatiable need to destroy. Maris, weapon drawn, stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "We need more time. They won't give us any." Lyra's mind raced. The keepers had said that the relic was their only chance, but the Voidborn were relentless, difficult to stop with conventional weapons. Every instinct told her that their only hope now was for the relic to come to life, for the ancient power buried beneath the earth to awaken in time. But the creatures' relentless attacks were pushing them to the edge. "We can't hold them off forever." Lyra shouted, her voice laced with frustration. She turned to Orin. "Hurry." Orin's face was etched with concentration, his brow furrowed. "It will be ready soon. But this power is not something to be wielded lightly, Commander. Even we are vulnerable to it." A shriek, high-pitched and terrible, ripped through the chamber. One of the Voidborn had managed to slip through the perimeter, its tendrils reaching toward the altar, its form expanding like a living shadow seeking to consume the relic. "Behind you," Maris shouted, her voice urgent. Before Lyra could react, the Voidborn struck, its tendrils darting forward, snaking through the air like vipers. One of the tendrils wrapped around Orin's arm, squeezing with inhuman strength, pulling him away from the altar. "No!" Solon yelled, launching himself toward the creature with desperate speed, his hands glowing with a faint blue light. He reached out, trying to sever the Voidborn's grip, but the creature shifted too quickly, its tendrils pulling Orin deeper into its mass of shifting darkness. Lyra's heart raced as she sprinted toward Orin, drawing her sidearm. The rest of her soldiers opened fire, but their shots merely seemed to vanish into the creature's shadowy form. It was like trying to fight the wind. Nothing had any effect. With a sharp cry, Maris hurled herself forward, her blade, a relic of her warrior past, glowing faintly as it cut through the Voidborn's tendrils. The blade met resistance, but with each strike, it carved through the darkness. Yet for every tendril she severed, 2 more sprouted in its place. The creature's form pulsed, shifting, warping in response to the violence. "Orin!" Lyra shouted, her voice breaking through the chaos. With a mighty effort, Orin twisted free, his hands glowing with a brilliant blue light that seemed to cut through the shadow. He struggled to his feet, his aura flaring, the power of the relic drawing closer. "It is done," Orin shouted, his voice full of fierce triumph. The relic beneath the altar pulsed violently, sending waves of energy crashing through the chamber, tearing through the Voidborn's shadowy forms. The room shook as the power of the relic exploded outward, the energy bending the very fabric of reality. The Voidborn shrieked, their forms dissolving under the onslaught of pure light. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze in time, the light from the relic bathing the chamber in a radiant glow that threatened to scorch the very air. The Voidborn writhed and screamed, their forms torn apart by the power unleashed. One by one, they faded, their presence no longer felt as they were consumed by the relic's energy. The room went silent, save for the echoing hum of the relic, its glow fading. Lyra looked around, her heart still pounding in her chest. The soldiers were panting, sweat dripping down their faces, but they were alive, and the Voidborn, at least for now, were gone. But even in the silence that followed, a lingering feeling remained in the pit of Lyra's stomach. The relic had repelled the Voidborn, but how long would its power last? And how many more of these creatures were still out there, waiting for their chance to strike? Lyra turned to Orin, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "Is this over?" Orin's expression was grim as he surveyed the room, his eyes reflecting the weight of what had just transpired. "No, this is only the beginning." The chamber fell still, the last echoes of the Voidborn's howls dissipating into the heavy silence. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder of how close they had come to disaster. Her soldiers, shaken but alive, kept their weapons trained on the shadows, still uncertain if more of the creatures were lurking in the darkness. Orin stood at the center of the chamber, his face drawn and weary, the blue glow around his eyes fading into the dim light of the relic. The power that had surged through the room was now ebbing, leaving behind only a faint hum, like the pulse of a living entity. Maris, still holding her weapon in a tight grip, scanned the perimeter, her instincts alert. "That wasn't just a simple attack," she said, her voice hard. "The Voidborn were trying to get to something. They were trying to stop us from reaching the relic." Solon nodded, his expression solemn. They knew the relic could harm them. It's a weapon of unimaginable power, capable of destroying them at their core. But we have to be careful. Even now, I sense their presence, lingering. They're not gone. Lyra frowned, her thoughts racing. So what now? Do we wait for them to regroup and come at us again? "No," Orin said, turning slowly to face her. "The Voidborn are more than just predators. They're a force of the universe itself, born from the chaos between worlds. Destroying one wave won't stop them. They are patient, and they are vast. Then how do we stop them for good?" Lyra asked, her voice tinged with frustration. "You said the relic was our last hope, but now we're left with nothing but silence." Orin's eyes darkened, the weight of his words settling between them. "The relic has destroyed their bodies, but it cannot reach their essence. Their power is not bound by the physical realm alone. There's another way, but it is a path fraught with danger. The Voidborn's heart lies far beyond our reach, on the edge of reality itself, in the void between stars." Lyra swallowed, her stomach tightening. "How do we get there?" "We need to follow the pulse of the relic," Solon explained. "It will lead us to the heart of their domain, the place where their true form is anchored. But it is not a simple journey. The closer we get to the Voidborn's heart, the more dangerous the path becomes. Reality itself begins to unravel the farther we go. Isn't there another way? Lyra asked, her mind racing. Something less catastrophic. Solon shook his head. The Voidborn do not leave us choices. We either find their source and destroy it, or they will continue to hunt us, consume us, until nothing remains. The tension in the room was palpable. Lyra's mind flashed to the faces of the soldiers, her comrades, each one relying on her to lead them through this nightmare. She couldn't allow them to be sacrificed in a futile attempt to chase an enemy that existed outside the very fabric of time and space, and yet the path was clear, even if it was fraught with danger. "We don't have the luxury of hesitation," she said, her voice firm with resolve. "We've made it this far. We'll go to the edge of the stars. We'll follow the relic's pulse, wherever it leads. It's the only way." Maris gave a sharp nod. "Then let's not waste time." Lyra glanced at the altar, where the relic's pulse was now faint but steady, like the heartbeat of the universe itself. She could feel it, an almost imperceptible hum in the air, drawing them in, calling them forward into the unknown. As the soldiers moved to prepare, gathering their gear and double-checking their weapons, Lyra turned back to Orin. "Can the relic guide us? Will it show us the way?" "It will," Orin said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "But be warned, what lies ahead is beyond anything you've known. Even we, the Keepers, are vulnerable to the temptations of the Voidborn's realm. We must remain focused." Solon placed a hand on the relic, his face reflecting both awe and fear. "The journey will not be one of mere distance. We will face the darkness itself, the corruption that feeds the Voidborn. It will test everything we are." Lyra clenched her fists, the weight of her responsibility pressing down on her. "We won't fail. We can't." With that, the group moved out, the sound of their footsteps reverberating through the empty chamber. The relic, now dormant for the moment, led them toward an uncertain future, its pulse a beacon in the darkness. But Lyra couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something more than just the Voidborn awaited them at the edge of reality. Something that had been waiting for eons, something that would test their very souls. As they made their way through the labyrinth of ancient tunnels, a shadow seemed to linger just beyond the reach of their senses, a whisper in the air that none of them could fully understand, but all of them could feel. And Lyra knew, deep down, that they were not alone. The journey had only just begun, and the worst was yet to come. The journey through the ancient tunnels grew increasingly oppressive. The walls seemed to close in on them, and the air became thick with a sense of inevitability. With each step, they moved farther away from everything they knew, plunging deeper into the unknown. Lyra's thoughts were consumed with the weight of their mission. The relic pulsed with an almost unbearable intensity, its steady hum reverberating through the walls, guiding them toward a destination that none of them fully understood. The deeper they went, the more the fabric of reality seemed to bend. It was subtle at first, small distortions, flickers of light in the corner of her vision, a sensation of vertigo that crept into her bones. But with every passing minute, it became more pronounced. Time itself seemed to twist and warp. The air was growing colder, the very space around them feeling thinner, like they were walking on the edge of existence itself. Solon, who had been silent for much of the journey, was the first to break the quiet. His voice, usually calm and steady, now carried a hint of urgency. "We're approaching the boundary. The relic's pulse is growing stronger, but so is the instability. We'll need to be ready for anything." Lyra nodded, her gaze fixed ahead. The further they descended, the darker it became. It was as if the light itself was being swallowed by the vastness of the void they were entering. She could hear the others breathing, steady but tense, as they pressed forward, the weight of their mission and the danger they faced pressing down on them. Suddenly, the passage opened up into a vast chamber. The walls were no longer smooth stone, but a jagged, otherworldly landscape, as though they had crossed into a different dimension altogether. The air crackled with energy, and the relic's pulse now echoed in their bones, reverberating in the very atoms around them. The ground beneath their feet seemed to flicker, shifting between solid and ethereal as though reality itself was unstable. "This is it," Orin said, his voice low, reverential. "We've reached the edge of the Voidborn's domain." The scene before them was like nothing Lyra had ever seen. The chamber stretched into infinity, the boundaries impossible to define. The sky above was a swirling, fractal mess of colors that seemed to pulse in time with the relic, as though it were the very heart of this place. The air felt alive, vibrating with a force that seemed to hum with the power of the universe itself. And in the center of this incomprehensible space stood the heart of the Voidborn. It was not a creature, not in any sense that Lyra understood. It was a vortex, a swirling mass of energy, a tear in the fabric of reality itself. It was the source of all the Voidborn's power, the place where they had come from, the place where their essence was anchored. Lyra could feel its pull, a gravitational force that threatened to consume everything in its proximity. "This is what we've been searching for," Orin said, his voice a whisper. "This is the heart of the Voidborn, the nexus of their existence." Maris stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "How do we destroy it?" Solan's expression was grim. "We don't, not directly. The only way to stop the Voidborn is to sever their connection to this place, this heart. But it won't be easy. The relic can't do it alone. We will have to sacrifice something to disrupt the connection, something far beyond what we're prepared for." Lyra's stomach churned. "What do you mean, sacrifice?" Orin's gaze met hers, and for the first time, she saw the weight of centuries of knowledge in his eyes. "We must sever the thread that binds them to this reality. But that thread is a part of us now. If we do it, we may never return. The fabric of reality will be torn, and we will be caught in the rift." The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Lyra's mind raced. She had known the risks of their mission, but the true cost, the sacrifice required to end the Voidborn's reign, was beyond anything she had imagined. "Then we do it," Lyra said, her voice firm, despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "We'll make the sacrifice. For Earth, for the future?" Maris nodded, her gaze unwavering. "We've come this far. We finish what we started." Solan stepped forward, his eyes reflecting the same grim determination. "The relic will help us, but we must remain focused. If any of us wavers, if we hesitate, the Voidborn will come for us." The group moved forward, the relic's pulse growing stronger as they neared the heart of the Voidborn. Lyra could feel the air itself warping around them, the gravity pulling them toward the center, as if the very universe was trying to drag them into the vortex. But there was no turning back. They had reached the edge of eternity, and they were about to make the ultimate sacrifice. In that moment, as they stepped toward the heart, Lyra felt something stir deep within her. A whisper, faint but insistent, echoed in her mind, a voice that had been waiting for eons. The very force that had created the Voidborn, and it spoke, not in words, but in a feeling, a message she could understand only too well. "You cannot escape the darkness. It is a part of you." The chilling realization froze her blood. The Voidborn were not the true enemy. They were only a reflection of something far darker, something within themselves. The realization hit Lyra like a blow to the chest, her breath catching in her throat. The voice in her mind, soft but insistent, felt like an ancient presence, older than the stars themselves. It echoed through her thoughts, not in words, but in a deep, primal understanding. "You cannot escape the darkness. It is a part of you." The words gnawed at her consciousness, twisting her sense of reality. She glanced at her companions, their faces grim with determination, unaware of the haunting whisper that now pulsed in her mind. The relic hummed louder, its energy surging as they neared the heart of the Voidborn, the swirling vortex of energy at the center of this forsaken place. "What was that?" she muttered, her voice shaking slightly. "What's wrong?" Maris asked, her eyes sharp, ever watchful. Lyra hesitated. She didn't want to share this, didn't want to voice the fear taking root inside her, but the truth was undeniable. She felt it, the darkness, the overwhelming pull of the void. It wasn't just the voidborn, it was something deeper, something fundamental to the very nature of existence. I don't know, she said, her voice barely a whisper. But I think we're not just fighting the voidborn, we're fighting ourselves. The words hung in the air, chilling them all in ways they couldn't explain. Oren's face paled, his eyes narrowing in thought. What do you mean? Something is inside me. Inside all of us, Lyra explained, her voice trembling with the gravity of what she had realized. The voidborn, this place, it's a manifestation of something darker. It's not just a force of destruction, it's a reflection of the chaos within the universe itself, and somehow it's bound to us. A heavy silence fell over the group, the weight of her words sinking in. Solon was the first to break the silence, his voice low and thoughtful. You're saying that the voidborn aren't just invaders, that they're tied to our very existence. Lyra nodded, her stomach turning with a fear she had never known. Yes, it's as though we, humanity, are the key to their power. The relic, the heart, the voidborn, it's all connected. We've been drawn here because of something inside us, some darkness we've inherited. Maris stepped forward, her expression hardening. What does that mean for us now? It means, Lyra said slowly, her eyes locked on the heart of the voidborn. The swirling vortex of pure energy that beckoned them forward, that the only way to destroy them might be to destroy a part of ourselves. The group fell silent again, the enormity of the choice before them settling heavily on their shoulders. The heart of the voidborn was pulsing, its power increasing by the second. They could feel it in their bones, its pull, its hunger. But now they knew that this wasn't just an external battle. It was a war for their very souls. Oren stepped forward, his eyes glowing with the knowledge of the ages. To sever the connection, we must sacrifice the darkness within us. The voidborn are a reflection of that darkness. If we destroy the heart, we must also destroy the part of ourselves that has allowed it to exist. That means letting go of everything we are, everything we fought for. Solon looked between them, his face grave. If we do this, if we succeed, there will be no going back. We will lose everything, the future, the past, the very essence of humanity itself. Lyra clenched her fists, her mind racing. The thought of such a sacrifice, a loss so complete that nothing would remain, was more terrifying than anything the voidborn had ever brought. But what choice did they have? If they didn't sever this connection, if they didn't destroy the heart, the voidborn would continue to rise, and humanity would be consumed by the darkness they had unknowingly nurtured. We have to do it, Lyra said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. We came here to protect the future of Earth, of humanity. If this is the price we have to pay, then we pay it. Maris's eyes softened, a look of quiet understanding passing between her and Lyra. For Earth, for all of us. Oren nodded solemnly, and even Solon, usually so cautious, gave a small, resolute nod. Together, they approached the heart of the voidborn, the relic humming louder as if responding to their determination. The air around them grew thick with energy, the space bending, warping, as the heart pulsed in rhythm with their hearts. They raised their hands, each of them channeling the power of the relic, focusing on the heart that lay before them, understanding the terrible price they had to pay. As the relic's energy surged to its peak, they felt the darkness inside them, ancient, insidious, feeding on their fears, their weaknesses, their anger. They could feel it all, the very essence of humanity's flaws, pulsing in time with the heart. And then, with a final, shattering surge of energy, they released it. A blinding flash of light filled the chamber, and for a brief moment, there was nothing but the sound of their own hearts beating, racing against time as they let go. The heart of the voidborn shattered, its dark energy unraveling like the threads of a broken tapestry. The force of the explosion sent shockwaves through the very fabric of space. The ground trembled, the air crackled with energy, and then silence. Lyra opened her eyes. The darkness that had haunted her mind was gone. The world around her was still. The relic, now dormant, lay at their feet, its purpose fulfilled. But what they had sacrificed, what they had given up, was something Lyra would never fully comprehend. All she knew was that the battle was over, the Voidborn were gone, and humanity, though scared, had a future.